Hey guys, what's up? Excoundrel here, and today is a little bit of a different video. I was playing some duo queue with my friend Alex, and we were playing up against a Saw in about Vainglorious Bronze, Vainglorious Silver level. And I thought to myself, a lot of people ask me how you beat a Saw, because Saw can be very oppressive in lower ranks, and it can be quite difficult to know how to play against him. So I thought that I would make a video just commentating over my win against the Saw. Spoiler alert, I win. But I wanted to explain about some of the things you can do to beat a Saw. Now, the first battle that you can win is in the draft phase. You kind of want to pick a carry with good wave clear. So things like Scarf, things like Celeste, they used to be pretty good against Saw simply because of the wave clear, that the Goop with the Ignite, the Supernova from the Heliogenesis, both of which are pretty good against Saw. Someone like Vox is okay, even though he's outranged. You can still use your resonance to clear the waves. But most importantly, especially as a captain main, it's very important that you pick a captain that's got a good amount of CC in their kit. And when I say CC, I just mean anything that can sort of stun, silence, root, knock up Saw, because he gets very, very, very limited movement speed when engaging in combat when he's fully spun up. So obviously, that makes him an easy target for things like Catherine's Stun. It makes him an easy target for things like Grace's Holy Nova. But I picked Grace specifically for a few reasons. The damage reduction from her shield is very, very, very good. So that means that even when someone like Blackfeather jumps in and tries to fight him, he'll have a damage reduction, which means he can last a little bit longer in close range against the Saw. And the fact that the Holy Nova can knock him up very easily because it's difficult for him to escape it because of his low movement speed. And it combos very nicely with Celeste's Core Collapse. The other reason is that I am going to go Fountain into Atlas Pauldrons this game, simply because I can charge my Atlas Pauldrons and then use Benediction, which is Grace's A, to jump on the Saw and instantaneously pop Atlas Pauldrons onto him. So that's another good reason why I think Grace is a pretty solid pick into Saw. All of her kit, in some way, shape or form, does work into Saw himself. So you saw there, we actually turned the tables on the Saw. We got the first turret at the 2 minutes into the game, and that kind of stemmed from my push into the enemy jungle. I pushed very early on into the enemy jungle and practically stole the entire first rotation from the Samuel, which meant that Samuel couldn't come and duel us in the mid. He got forced back because he was level 1. We actually got a kill onto Saw because I was able to 1v2 in the jungle. That allowed my Blackfeather and Celeste to put pressure onto Saw in lane, meaning that we were able to push and get the first turret of the game. And that brings me to my main point about Saw. He practically has one role, and that is push turrets. That's really, really good for solo queue. Like, pushing turrets in solo queue is great because honestly, most people forget this, that they are just the main objective in Vainglory. Like, pushing turrets should be your main objective, and Saw is kind of one of the best placed heroes to do that. So if people don't know how to deal with Saw, and you're able to beat people 1 versus 1, Saw can get really, really hard to deal with, simply because he can kind of get out of control. If you can continuously clear lane, put lots of pressure onto Saw in lane, like applying CC, like jumping on him with Benediction, getting Core Collapses on him, bursting him with Celeste, if you can stop him getting early turrets, you really put Saw on the back foot, because the longer the game goes, the easier it is for you to burst a Saw who's more than likely going to be going full weapon power. Like, most Saws go like Sorrow Blade into Triple Turret's Monocle, or Serpent's Mask into Breaking Point into Turret's Monocles, something like that. So the more pressure you can put on Saw in the early game, especially if you've got someone like a Blackfeather and a Celeste, the better it is going to be for your team in general. Now, we were actually doing really well, but I made a bit of a mistake when I basically disrespected the Samuel, and now Samuel's back into the game. Like, I single-handedly took Samuel out of the game early on by taking his early game rotations in the jungle, but then I made the mistake of letting him back into the game. He got basically a complete ace on us early on, and we kind of let Samuel get a foot back into the game. If we hadn't let Samuel get a foot back into the game, we would have been able to end this game very, very quickly. The problem is that we've given Samuel gold, Samuel spikes really hard in the mid game, and with Dragon's Eye, Samuel scales really well as well. And you'll notice that when we look at the items, if we get a chance to look at the items, Samuel actually goes Dragon's Eye first, which is a real problem for us because we kind of let him have that. But realistically, we've done really good work on putting pressure on Saw, and again, the more pressure we put on Saw, the better. This is what I mean. I'm going to actually stun Saw before he gets his suppressing fire down, because that stops him from getting spun up. So Saw is heavily countered. If he tries to use his suppressing fire to spin up and get his attack speed stacks, any kind of CC onto Saw in that period, if you stop the suppressing fire, he won't get his stacks, which makes him very, very vulnerable in fights. And most Saws will need to invest early into a reflex block, especially if you're going to have that amount of CC on the table. If you don't have any CC, he doesn't have to invest in a reflex block, and that's 700 gold that he can use towards getting his spikes, like the Sorrow Blades or the Serpent's Mask, whichever Saw you kind of face up against. So if you bring hard CC to the table versus a Saw, he needs to have a reflex block because he's such a vulnerable carry. We made a little mistake here. We were sort of dicing around the jungle. Again, I want to avoid dueling Samuel, especially pre-level 8 for the Celeste, simply because Celeste before level 8's range is really bad, so we just get outranged by Samuel really hard. Again, we do have the reflex block for Saw now, but we did manage to chain our CC so that he got stunned up after the reflex block had come down. But again, Samuel's starting to do some serious work to us, so we just have to be very careful about how we approach these next few team fights. He is now the problem child for us. Saw really isn't that much of an issue. Saw is going to benefit if we let Samuel get ahead. So the more that we let Samuel get ahead, the more that Saw is going to benefit. Because again, Saw, at this point, wants to avoid fights with us. He just wants to push lane and push turrets. You know, he's not in a position where he can fight against us easily. So realistically, it's very unlikely that, you know, we're going to see Saw engage in too many sort of 3v3s or 1v1s, simply because he doesn't really have the items necessary to duel up against the Celeste. The problem we're having is this guy here, Samuel. He's starting to build up Dragon's Eye stacks. He's starting to become a real threat in these fights. And again, the mistakes that we are making, simply, we're just letting Samuel get away with too much. Like, Samuel is sort of untouched in the back of the fight. We're fighting pre-level 8. We got an advantage, and really we now sort of need to wait until level 8 for Celeste before we can really start to fight against Samuel. And you can see here, I should be body blocking more, but I'm also very, very, very low HP. And that's just unfortunately causing us a bit of an issue in the sense that Samuel's getting free malice and verdicts from range, because we just don't really have the range to deal with Samuel right now. And you see here that even despite our best efforts, Samuel gets a double kill, and he's again just really chunking us. We give away this first turret for free because we're just engaging in fights against the Samuel when we don't have the range to do so. And that's allowing Saw back into the game, because the more global objectives we give over to Saw, the better. Now, we're very lucky, actually, that these guys don't commit to things like the gold mine. They aren't committing to gold mine, even though I think they're committing to gold mine, because you can see by my vision control, I can't really see what they're doing on the center of the map. You can see Saw not going to gold mine pretty much gives away that they're unlikely to go, because Samuel is a very slow objective taker, and if Saw's not going for gold mine, then it's unlikely that they'll be going for gold mine in general. So we're kind of getting away with not giving away too much global gold here. And I'm now going to work towards an Atlas pauldrons, because Atlas pauldrons serve the purpose of single-handedly shutting down Saw. He really relies on his attack speed, so if he has to block hard CC, he's not going to be able to block Atlas pauldrons. And what I can do, like I said previously, is I'm going to prime my Atlas pauldrons, and then I'm going to use my benediction. So I'm going to hit Atlas pauldrons, I'm going to benediction my target, and as soon as I appear on Saw, my Atlas pauldrons should be proccing, which means it's going to be harder for him to predict and block, because I'll have been doing it through the animation of my benediction. So that's what I'm going to aim for in these fights. My prime goal is find an opportunity to benediction onto Saw with my Atlas pauldrons, and then with that gives me an opportunity to set up for a benediction as well. We don't want to fight when Drifting Dark is up, so you can see here we're just kind of backing away when Drifting Dark goes down, and this now gives me an opportunity. And again, he is attack slowed. He does block the Holy Nova, but he is attack slowed, which puts him right out of the fight. Gives us a really good opportunity here just to take the fight in our favour, and you can see Saw already forced back now with very low HP, forcing out the fountain early on. We still have our fountain available, and that again gives me another opportunity to just run to the back of the fight and use that Holy Nova, allowing us to put pressure onto Saw and force him out. And that has essentially allowed us to clean up the fight. And again, if I were to go back and talk about the most important parts of that, I jumped in with benediction and I used Holy Nova. That set up the opportunity for me to... I just got killed by Samuel, rip. But that set up the opportunity for me to then force Saw out of the fight with a Holy Nova. The reason Saw got forced out was simply because he couldn't attack anybody with such low attack speed, and then he had to force to use his block on my Holy Nova, which meant that he was very low HP because he was already trying to avoid the Celeste as much as possible. And once Saw was forced out the fight, it was just up to Blackfeather to put pressure onto the Samuel, which he did. We forced out a very early fountain from them, which allowed us to give us the fountain advantage because I managed to use my Holy Nova to keep Blackfeather pretty healthy. The problem was I kind of threw by going in onto the Catherine in their jungle. And that's then again allowed Samuel to get a huge amount of damage down, clean up the fight. And again, it's the same problem we were having in the early games. Samuel has been the issue for us. We're not focusing Samuel enough. I've kind of put all of my eggs onto dealing with Saw. And again, he kind of overextends here. It gives me an opportunity to just try and get the Atlas Pauldrons, which he blocks, but it doesn't matter because he now doesn't have a block for the Holy Nova, which just basically then allows the Blackfeather to clean him up. The Blackfeather didn't clean him up, which means I have to clean him up, but regardless, I tried to leave the kill for him, but I don't think Blackfeather was getting over the wall. Saw overextended there. And that allowed us to get a free cleanup. I'm going for a Crucible now, simply because the Crucible is going to be needed for both the Oblivion and the Blast Tremor from Catherine. I just felt like it was more important to have the ability to shut down Saw. And you can see this is now 10 minutes into the game. Saw has only got one turret. That's just a good place for us to be in versus the Saw. And again, it's all through that ability of comboing our hard CC with my Atlas Pauldrons to take him out of these fights. You can see how much of a problem Samuel is becoming, though, and it forces me to use a fountain early on. I then do manage to force them back, and they bait out a lot of ultimates as well, but regardless, that's a fountain down, and we really don't want to fight when our fountain is down because Samuel is just so good at these sustained fights. I have to use my Holy Nova just to keep Celeste alive. She does manage to get a really, really good core collapse off onto the Samuel, which has kind of allowed us to turn things around, but unfortunately Samuel's Drifting Dark came off cooldown and Celeste overextended. She was looking to get a Supernova onto him because they just used the fountain and thought maybe he could be able to burst him, but regardless, again, that Samuel range is just really, really strong. You should never really fight Samuel when he has Drifting Dark available, but as you can see from his builds when we look at it, he does pretty much have a clockwork at this point in time, which means that Drifting Dark is going to come off cooldown very, very quickly. Again, I stopped the push there by simply just Atlas Pauldroning the Saw, and that's given us another opportunity to try and force a fight here because he used his reflex block already. Oblivion splits us up, but I'm just trying to force Saw out of the fight here, so keep myself out of range, force him out of the fight. Once Drifting Dark goes down, because my fountain's about to come off cooldown, it gives us a really good opportunity to look for a fight again, because I have that Atlas Pauldrons. I'm going to prime it, jump in, there we go, hits him, attack slowed, and I have to pop my fountain just to keep me alive. But regardless, I got all of the things off that I wanted, and you can see that Blackfeather and Celeste are still very, very healthy. They don't have a fountain at the moment because I think they used it in one of their previous engages. I'm just trying to look for an opportunity to go in and use my Holy Nova onto the right target and not Holy Nova, use my Benediction onto the right target as well as my Divine Intervention. You can see here on the sidelines I'm able to clean up Saw by myself just because he was so low and didn't have the sort of correct positioning in the fight. So I was basically waiting on the outskirts of the fight. I didn't want to go in without using skills. The most important thing for me was to find the right opportunity there to use my Divine Intervention, which I did onto the Blackfeather, and then use my Benediction to get that shield on myself to find an opportunity to get a Holy Nova onto Saw. And I did. And that sort of helped us win that fight there. We're going for the gold miner now. Celeste is clearing the lane. Would have been probably better for us overall if Celeste came straight to gold miner, but on reflection, if you look at what Celeste actually did, she's pushed the wave up, which means we all know Saws love to go to lane and clear the wave, so pushing the wave up against the Saw kind of distracts him. It keeps him in position. He's going to spin up to clear the wave, which means he's going to have a low movement speed. It means he's not going to get to the gold mine to contest us. So realistically, the main threat for us there was Samuel getting a steal with his Malice and Verdict and his Drifting Dark. So now we're in a pretty strong position. Celeste is at 3 to 3.5 items, which means he's post level 8 with 3.5 items, meaning that he's going to hit really hard. So that's good for us because obviously Celeste outranges Saw. Again, we still need to think about a good way to deal with Samuel. Like, the best way for me is Blackfeather. Going in on him, and Blackfeather actually built correctly here. He went for a Poison Shiv build. Like, obviously it's tempting to go for the classic Serpent's Mask build, but the Poison Shiv is really, really important versus a Samuel. I actually go in here and I'm forced to use my boots to get away because simply I overextended. Luckily, I forced them to use some items that some abilities that are really important in a teamfight situation, and they wasted a lot of resources on me. I used my Divine Intervention just a little bit too early there, which forced me to use my Fountain, but we got a lot of damage down to the Saw. We force it into a 2 versus 3 situation again, and once more we put ourselves in a position where we put ourselves in a position where we're going to win the team fight through pure numbers. And even with Samuel's Dragon's Eye stacks going up, Celeste has got her own Dragon's Eye stacks going up, and she managed to get an amazing snipe onto Samuel at the end there. So again, the prime directive of our fights is just kill Saw and then force a 2 versus 3. Samuel takes 9 seconds at least to stack up his Dragon's Eye, so we know that we got about 9 seconds of team fight available before we sort of get caught out. And as long as we kill Saw, we take out one of their major components in the team fight. If you look at Saw's build, he actually ended up going for something really weird. He went for like a super defensive build, just going off a Sora Blade, which means realistically he wasn't going to spike in terms of damage. I think he just felt like he was getting focused too much, so really wanted to sort of go for the heavy defensive build, but that's just not a right build to take. I understand the reasoning for it, but realistically, you're going to be a potato in a team fight if you build the way he did. Like, he built Sorrow Blade, Crucible, something else. Like, it's just not a good way to build a Saw. Like, you need to be a damage threat, otherwise we can just ignore you. So still, we're in a position where they've only got 2 turrets, and we're actually in a good position versus a Saw because we're 15 minutes into the game and he hasn't won. So, the longer you can sort of take Saw in a fight, the better it is for you as a team. You can see here that I have to use a Divine Intervention early on. The ultimate doesn't quite hit from the Celeste, which means we're in a pretty awkward position. I use a pretty solid late Fountain, but at this point in time, we're now stuck behind enemy lines. They are all very healthy. We've run out of sustain, and essentially, we've basically lost the fight at this point. We didn't quite focus correctly. Me and Celeste were poorly positioned. Essentially, we overextended and we were taking too much damage from the Samuel from the side lanes, and we didn't manage to get a good ultimate off from the Celeste. We didn't hit as many supernovas, and by the time that I'd used my Divine Intervention, Blackfeather had committed to a full-on fight. If I'd had my Divine Intervention saved for Blackfeather, we might have been able to win that, but unfortunately I used it really early on Celeste. This is now a scary situation. A Saw who's spun up, got an ace buff minion wave, and they're going to have Kraken as well. This means that we're going to have to defend with our lives. So this is going to be a tough defense for us. If we make one mistake here, we might end up losing the game entirely. So we sort of made a positioning error in the last fight, which has given them a way back into the game. We have good clear on the Kraken. We have obviously got a Celeste who can clear Kraken pretty quickly, as well as a Blackfeather. I take this position here. You see I'm in the mustache brush just above lane because Celeste was a little bit overextended, and I wanted to make sure I kept vision of the enemy team to make sure that Celeste didn't get caught out. Drifting Dark comes down. This is an immediate opportunity for us to back off. If I were to sort of look at things for me to improve, I'll probably talk about them more at the end of this video, but one of the things that I'm really not doing well enough in this game is blocking Catherine ultimates and body blocking for Celeste. Like, I'm letting Celeste take way too many Malice and Verdicts for free, and you can see here again he just takes more and more and more, so he's forced to use a Divine Intervention again very, very early. I also don't have a Echo, very important item for a Celeste. I'm going to start body blocking now, but it's a little bit too little too late at this point because everybody's already taking like ridiculous damage. Celeste has got Eve of Harvest, so she is going to start to regenerate, and she manages to snipe off Samuel, which essentially wins us the fight. We do lock up Saw and kill him and allow us to then clean up for the ace here, but realistically I could have made that so much easier by body blocking more and also crucibling the Catherine ultimate. I did also have the backup of a Fountain still, so it wasn't all doom and gloom. I still had the Fountain to go for us, but by not having the Echo and by going for the Atlas pauldrons over the Echo, I don't have the bailout of a double Divine Intervention, so I need to make sure that I'm blocking as much damage as I physically can for the Celeste, because if she eats Malice and Verdicts like she was in that fight, it's pretty much game over because they're going to shred through Celeste. And so I need to be the person that's eating Malice and Verdicts. If anyone in the team is going to eat Malice and Verdicts, realistically you want to avoid them during Drifting Dark anyway. But if anyone is going to get hit by them, it needed to be me, and I need to be doing more body blocking here. The minion wave can body block, as much as it can, but realistically, I don't want Celeste to take as much damage as she did before that fight broke out. So it's something that I think I need to improve off the back of this game. This is a really important phase of the game now, because if we lose one team fight, like Celeste taking a lot of damage here, again, I'm now sort of being a front line, trying to block as much as I can. There's the Divine Intervention coming out. I also block the Oblivion, and this is basically a race to protect Celeste. I don't have a Echo, like I said, so it's going to have to be Fountain or nothing. It was a good Fountain because Celeste was on very low HP, and she lands an incredible... core collapse there. I did as much as I could in that fight, but now it's up to Celeste and up to the Blackfeather. These core collapses from Celeste are like basically single-handedly winning us the fight right now, and that's essentially Blackfeather able to clean up. But all of these core collapses won us the fight single-handedly. So luckily we were able to kite back enough. Celeste again took too much damage that I wasn't able to body block, and she basically carried that fight super hard. So we have an aced minion wave now, and we've got 2 carries that have regenerated their HP. So basically this is the end of the game. If they do this right, and the best way to do this is split focus when you get to the Vein Crystal turrets, they should now be able to end the game. It'll be close, but they'll be able to get it and win the game versus the Saw. So this is a good time to reiterate some of the main points about beating a Saw in a ranked game. First of all, make sure you draft correctly. If you're a captain, you need to bring hard CC to the table. So things like Catherine, Grace, Lance, anything like that, is good against a Saw. If you're drafting a Lyra into a Saw, you better be damn sure that you've got some sort of carry that's going to be able to blow him up, because you don't really bring anything else to the table that would be good against a Saw. So you need to make sure you're drafting correctly. Anything with any form of crowd control is going to be good against him. Make sure you clear waves in the early game and focus him as much as, he deserves respect. A Saw deserves respect. You need to respect him in lane, and that means you need to clear waves and gank him as much as possible. The better you protect your turrets, the better it's going to be for you overall in the game. Get an Atlas pauldrons as a captain and proc them on him every fight. Make sure you're forcing him out of the fight with the Atlas pauldrons, or forcing him out of fight by threatening with hard CC. You need to draft for a late game as well. Like, you can snowball against a Saw, sure, but it is far more comfortable to have a late game mage like Celeste or Scarf that can blow him up in the later stages of the game. Hope it's been useful for you guys, and I will see you next time.